So, today I want to talk about how we often feel like our work isn't as important as it would be if we were on the front line leading and doing impactful, important work. Now, my pink flamingo friend, let me tell you some truth right out the gate. Your work matters, whether you're at the forefront or not. We don't have to be firefighters fighting fires and pulling people from buildings to do important work. We don't have to be doctors doing life saving surgeries to do important work. You are impactful here and now. So let's unpack this. Now, I was having a conversation with a friend who shared that when her husband decided to volunteer during a disaster event, she felt guilty about staying home. To her, staying home didn't feel like it was worth anything when compared to the frontline work her husband was doing. She did not feel like she was contributing in any way, shape, or form. Her perspective changed when she mentioned her guilt to her husband, and her husband shared, "Honey, you know the only reason why I am able to be out there and be so effective is because I know you have things taken care of at home." Imagine that. She felt like she wasn't doing anything important, and in his eyes, her behind the scenes work actually allowed him to do the work he was called to do in that season without worry because of her role. He was able to do the work he feels so called to in that season without having to worry about anything. The impact of the work he did was multiplied because she worked behind the scenes. I share all this to say that the work we do behind the scene is as important as the work people are called to do on the front lines. Oftentimes, our work behind the scenes make the impactful work possible. And not just makes it possible, it multiplies that impactful work. So don't degrade the work that you're doing behind the scenes. Now I want to share with you another story. During a visit in NASA in 19 during a visit to NASA in 1962, President Kennedy reportedly stopped and asked the janitor what he was doing. The janitor replied, "I am helping to put a man on the moon." That janitor saw the importance of his work. He saw that his role served a higher purpose. While others would look on and probably cringe at the idea of becoming a janitor, he looked on and saw the bigger mission. His role was critical to putting a man on the moon. This wasn't just about wiping corridors or cleaning rooms. This was about putting the man on the moon. Oh, to be someone with that kind of attitude and perspective, to feel no shame about the place that God placed you or the role God's assigned you, because your work is helping to put a man on the moon. And the truth is, even if your work isn't as literal as that janitor, you still help to put men and women on the moon of their lives every day. I recently heard a story about a janitor who served at an elementary school for decades. His wonderful singing voice and kindness and manner of being inspired thousands of children and their parents throughout the years. Imagine being a janitor who impacts lives and changes legacies so deeply that kids and their parents remember you decades later. I believe this is a part of what Peter means in 1 Peter 5 verse 2 when he says, "Care for the flock that God entrusted to you. Watch over it willingly, not grudgingly, not for what you will get out of it, but because you're eager to serve God." Sometimes caring for the flock is the most boring and least impressive thing you will ever do by the world standard. But there are still so many extraordinary moments to be discovered every day. Many moments when God uses situations to teach you things. Many moments when God uses situation to refine you and bless others. It would be a pity to miss all that because you feel like what you're doing and who you are isn't important. My pink flamingo friend, remember, you are important no matter if your work is visible or invisible. And that's straight from Bible. That's what Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 12 verse 22 to 27. And I read, "In fact, some members of the body that seem weak and least important are actually the most necessary. Imagine that. And I continue. And the parts we regard as least honorable are those we clothe with the greatest care. So we carefully protect those parts that should not be seen, while the more honorable parts do not require this special care. So God has put the body together such that extra honor and care are given to those parts that have least dignity. This makes for harmony among the members so that all the members care for each other. If one part suffers, all the parts suffer with it. And if one part is honored, all the parts are glad. All of you together are Christ's body, and each of you is a part of that. That ends it there. Can you imagine? God looked down and saw it fit to create you to be a member of this world. You are needed in His plan. You are needed to make the body function properly. The body has many members, and no member is more important than the other. Each member's work is equally important. If one member stops doing its work, the whole body stops functioning properly. I've never heard anyone say they want to be intestines, but if the intestines stop working, somebody dies. I've never heard anybody say, I want to be the butt. The truth is, intestine work is grunt work to a lot of people. Butt work is icky work. It gets people uncomfortable if you dare to mention it in public. And yet, if the butthole closes up forever, organ starts to fail. Suddenly we are on the point of death. That is how important or behind the scenes, not important work is. It doesn't matter if you're a janitor, a garbage collector, a waiter, a secretary, or a stay-at-home mom. You're helping to put some man on the moon. You're playing your part for God's will to be done in the earth. And yes, sometimes it happens in corporate where you feel like because you're behind the scenes, your work doesn't matter. And that could not be true. Like, just think about the stay-at-home mom. She stabilizes the family. You help to stabilize the children and keep the home in order. You ensure that daddy functions well as he goes out to work. That is hard and important note. And on a side note there, that's why you have to love and pour into yourself so that you can flow. But that's a whole conversation for another day. My point stands. It doesn't matter if you or society looks down on the work you do or doesn't see the value of it. The work you do, the work that God assigned you to do is important work, whether it is visible or not. Now, it would be irresponsible of me to end without touching on one thing. Some people choose behind the scenes work, but some people have behind the scenes work foisted upon them. Sometimes due to obedience to God, sometimes because of external circumstances. And the truth is, how do we deal with that? What happens when you are unwillingly shifted from frontline work and placed behind the scenes? What happens when it feels like you were headed to the mountaintop of your choice and now it feels like you slid backwards into behind the scene work that you didn't choose willingly? How do you deal with the shame and other emotions that are attached to that? I want to share a story. I spent 10 years in corporate chasing a dream. I put so much energy and money into getting degrees and chasing titles and accomplishments. I had hopes and dreams about becoming an executive leader and sitting on corporate and nonprofit boards. Not necessarily because of the impact that came with it, but because of the prestige and recognition that came with it. I pursued my mountain of success, and people affirmed that vision, not realizing the destructive motives that drove me. They would tell me, "You are smart, you're meant for great things, you're exactly who I want to be like." And I believed it. I soaked it up because it was evidence that I was on the right track. Yet after my second burnout, God told me to walk away from corporate. It wasn't an easy decision, but I obeyed, and it was hard. I held on to my dreams and hopes, hoping I could still have them. I never saw or acknowledge the destructive motivations that drove me. So a part of me grew aggrieved as time went by, thinking I had lost access to fulfilling those dreams and accessing the prestige and external approval that came with it. And then there was a shame that came. When I left corporate, God told me not to accept any of the job offers that came my way. I see now that they would have kept me on the path that I still had in mind as the way to success. Instead, the only door I could see that was open for me was to become a virtual executive assistant. That's what you call a EVA, a VEA. That was fine because I was burnt out and just needed a break. But there's a huge difference between being a VEA and actually telling people that you are a VEA, especially when those people expect so much of you, especially when you left a corporate position that had so much prestige. Though in the business world, an EA is a highly respected position because they're the right hand of the CEO, to me, that role felt demeaning. I felt like I had taken a step backward instead of continuing on the successful path I was on before. It was important work, but it didn't feel as important as the work I did before. It felt like I had left the important work on the front lines, where I was impacting millions, if not billions of people, where I had the respect of high-level peers, to go work behind the scenes alongside a leader who got all the visible credit for my behind-the-scenes work. I carried a lot of shame about leaving the important front lines to go backward into something that was behind the scenes. I quivered in my boots when I thought of what people would say. I felt like people were going to say, she left her good work to go do what? I felt like I had left a path where others looked at me and praised my success to become someone who people would look at and think, yeah, she's wasting her potential. I felt like I was a failure and was ashamed of failing. So I wore a mask for years around that, pretending that I had a plan and that I was more successful than I was. Then my need for control stepped in to turn things around for me. I started to push to do things that I thought would bring me success. I started doing all the things other people told me would bring me success, except it didn't work the way I expected because I had stepped out of alignment with God, with what God was telling me and where God was showing me to go. As I was writing this post, I had an epiphany. God gave me my corporate hopes and dreams, but for years I missed that blessing because of my destructive motivations and shame. You see, as an executive virtual assistant, I was the right hand and chief advisor to business leaders. I had the ear of leaders and the leaders around those leaders. My behind the scenes work and words carried weight. They put more men on the moon of their lives than I could ever know. They helped thousands of business owners build and scale their businesses and nonprofit. They impacted thousands of people and their families through nonprofits. But I missed that God gave me my desires because I was so focused on the package I expected them to come in. And there was another blessing that I missed. And the reason I missed it again is because my behind the scenes work. There was another blessing I missed in my behind the scenes work because I was so busy waiting for my moment to go back to the more important frontline work. God used that season to shape and refine me. Can you imagine being ashamed of the very season that He used to show me who I am in Him? The Pink Flamingo way was born in that season. I learned what it looked like to love God, love me, and love my neighbor in that season. I shifted out of a lot of gray flamingo behaviors in that season. He used that season to show me the years I spent people-pleasing and self-sacrificing and trying to live life by what others expected of me. He used that season to call me to a higher version of myself, to heal me, to call me into who He created me to be. And this reminds me so much of King David. David was called from the behind-the-scenes work of being a shepherd. Then he was anointed king and sent back to the field. Can you imagine the questions he may have had? Why would he be appointed for such important frontline work only to be sent back to do behind the scenes work that didn't feel important. I hope he did not have the mindset I had. I hope he realized that God was teaching him about shepherding others as he would one day be a shepherd of people. I hope he realized that if it was revealed that he was anointed to be king, then King Saul and his family would have probably killed him. His behind the scenes work was important. It was also preparation and protection work. And so, my pink flamingo friend, I can't stress enough to you how important your work behind the scene is. So do not let shame about your transition and your focus on your past frontline duty, hopes, and dreams cause you to miss the blessing. Stop you from seeing the blessing that God has given you and the importance of the work that God is doing, not just in you, but through you to impact people. Now, there's a truth I need to tell you about this journey. Matthew 23, 1-12 talks about the importance of not just telling people about the word, but also giving them an accurate picture of what it's like to live it out. I shared my story, but I did not share that it took me years to recognize my mistakes. In fact, I had accepted God's vision for me. I was walking alongside him even though it was hard. And yet there was a part of me that took the measuring sticks of success that I had from my corporate days and put them onto the vision God gave me. I took what I thought the manifestation of my hopes and dreams would look like in terms of impacting a lot of people and being a leader, and I put all of that onto the vision God gave me. I was still heavily influenced by my prior destructive motivations. I still expected him to fulfill my unrefined hopes and desires in the package I expected. And a part of me resented that approval and prestige had not yet come to pass. Eventually, as parts of his vision for me came to pass, but not the pieces I expected, that part started to feel betrayed by God. Let me give you a glimpse into my prayer time. I would say things like, Lord, you've promised me this for a while. I am walking with you. I'm not always obedient, but I'm learning to be consistent around my obedience where you're concerned and the things that concern you. And yet I still feel like a failure. I feel like I have not yet achieved the success that you've promised me or even see a hint of it coming. It took me a while to get here, but eventually it hit me. I never grieved and submitted the package that I hoped my dreams and hopes would come in. I never submitted my hopes and dreams to God. There was spiritual, emotional, and control work I couldn't skip. You probably know a person or two who can relate to what I just shared. People who believe and walk with God, but they carry a deep sense of disappointment about what things look like now behind the scenes after God took them off the front line. And they haven't grieved the release of the unrefined hopes and the dreams they had while on the front line. So that disappointment builds and builds until resentment rears its ugly head. It feels like God is keeping them behind the scenes. It feels like God has forgotten them. There's that sense of betrayal. There's that struggle to keep hoping and believing. And this is where the spiritual, emotional, and control work comes in around the expectations you have. Because at some point, you released something. You walked away from the package you thought things would happen through. Maybe you're even hoping that at some point God will put you back into that same position so that you can continue where you left off. But you walked away from the timeline and the plan you had in mind. And sometimes it feels like you walked away from the hopes and dreams you had. You released something. And sometimes that brings with it a sense of loss. And that sense of loss brings with it emotions that you need to handle. Unhandled, those emotions will fester and choke you alive. They will block your ability to see what God is doing in your life. They will stop you from seeing when God gives you the very things you hoped for. They will block you from seeing when God refines and fulfills your hopes and desires. They will cause you to resent seasons that the Lord used to bless you and others. They will cause you to reject your preparation season, to reject God's version of success for you. You will find yourself in a season that God is literally showing you, hey, you're walking in my version of success for you, but you are unable to see it because your heart is stuck on the package you expected it to come in and what you hoped it will look like and feel like. Obediently moving from the front lines is not just about embracing God's version of success for you and allowing Him to refine your hopes and dreams. It is also about permitting yourself to deal with that sense of loss, to grieve what your heart felt you lost as you submit your version of success to God, to mourn how you thought it would be, what you thought it would look like, and when you thought it would happen. God is not afraid of your feelings. And until you release that pain, your perspective of what God is doing through your behind the scenes work will be skewed. I submitted my will to God, and I had to deal with the pain associated with the fact that my view of success for me and other people's view of success for me was not necessarily God's view of success for me. It took me years to learn this lesson, and I hope you receive it today so that you don't spend years missing the joy and blessings that God has for you and others as He shifts you from what seems to be important frontline work to the not so important behind the scenes. Your behind the scenes are as important as your frontline work. There's one more truth about God's assignment that I'd like to share with you. We miss out on the value of the important work God calls us to do when we minimize the seasons we are meant to learn things, grow, and serve others. It is important, essential work, even if it doesn't seem heroic, even if it is not high profile, even if it's behind the scenes, it is necessary work. Here's what I learned as I close off. Your work is important. It doesn't matter what hat you wear in your personal life, whether you're a brother, whether you're a sister, whether you have kids, whether you're working a job, whether you're a business owner, whether you're a husband, whether you're a wife, whether you're a child. It doesn't matter the role. It doesn't matter the professional hat you wear. What is most important is to ensure that we're in the role and operating fully in the role that God has assigned us to in this season. That you are being your pink flamingo self. That you are taking up the space that He created you to dominate because your work matters. No matter what that work look like, it is as important as the work the person on the visible front line does. No work that we will do in any other area of our life will be as important as the work we do in this area, in the field that God has assigned to us. And when I say behind the scenes work, I use that phrase very lightly because truthfully, I believe that everybody is operating on the front line somewhere. Every single work that we do is a front line of some sort. And so, my pink flamingo friend, that is my invitation for you. Just pause and learn from God who you are in Him. Get a picture of who He created you to be. You don't even have to go down the road of, Lord, show me all. Ask Him today, what is the one step that you want me to take today? And that's the one step of work you do. It doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense. It doesn't matter if it seems inconsequential. If God says you're supposed to do it, if God says that's a role you should fill, it is very, very, very important in the grand scheme of His plan. So the behind the scenes work that you're called to do, your behind the scenes work is important to God. Your behind the scenes work is important to God's plan for this world. So, my pink flamingo friend, be your pink flamingo self today and recognize the importance of your work. You are valuable. Your work is valuable and it is needed whether you're on the front lines or you're behind the scenes. So my pink flamingo friend, today I want to encourage you that birds, and Shaniel, will you today.